Hi class, let's go over chapter 5, the elasticity chapter. Okay, so first of all, you should know what elasticity means. So elastic means flexible, so how flexible you are. Elasticity just measures how flexible consumers or suppliers is to different markets, to different market factors. So first, let's look at some definitions. So first, elasticity is a numerical measurement of the responsiveness of QD, which is quantity demanded, or QS, or quantity supplied to one of the determinant change. So if anything changes, how much does our quantity demand change, and how much does our quantity supplied change? That's called elasticity. So first, let's learn the price elasticity of demand. Um, the formula for it is the percentage change in quantity demanded. So elasticity of demand is the percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. Now the little triangle is called delta, it stands for change. So how much, or the percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price, that's your elasticity of demand. So let's look at this question over here. So suppose our price decreased by 10%, quantity, price increased by 10%, quantity decreased by 15%. So elasticity for demand is the percentage change on quantity on top. That's a minus 15%. And then the percentage change in price on the bottom, that's a 10%. So this will be a negative 1.5. Now, the same with the price elasticity for demand is always going to be negative. And then the reason why it's negative because your demand curve is downward sloping, so it's a negative slope. Now, since we don't like negative numbers, we hate negative numbers. So every time you finish with the price elasticity for demand, do this. Take absolute value. So the answer is always positive. There, much easier, right? So um, so it's the absolute change in your quantity demanded over the quantity supplied. That's the price elasticity for demand. So it is 1.5. Now, let's do some real numbers. So we have 250 and 200, and then 8 and 12. So if I ask you, how do you find out your price elasticity for demand? So first you do your percentage change in quantity, and then you find out what's your percentage change in price. Um, I know that in your other classes you probably learned this before. That the percentage change is the new minus the old divided by the old, right? Now, guys, once we go on to the chapter for inflation, you're gonna do this. So new minus old divided by old. But for this graph over here, we have 2 points A and B. Now, here they're saying between A and B, which one's new, which one's old? We don't know, right? It's hard to see which one's new, which one's old. So we're gonna do something called a midpoint method. So the midpoint method, to find the percentage change in quantity, this will be Q1 minus Q2 over Q1 plus Q2 divided by 2. And then for the price same thing, so P1 minus P2 over P1 plus P2 divided by 2. Now, once you do the midpoint method, doesn't matter which point comes first, your final answer will be the same. So let's suppose this is P1, this is P2, and this is Q1, this is Q2. So for this, so quantity will be 12 minus 8 over 12 plus 8 divided by 2. So this will be 4 over, so that's 20 divided by 2, that's a 10. So that's a 0.4. And then for price, so P1 is 200 minus 250 over 200 plus 250 divided by 2. Don't forget divide by 2, okay? So on top, that's a negative 50. On the bottom, that's a 225. Let me see what this is. So let me use my iPhone and my calculator. So 50 divided by 225 is 0, so negative 0.2222 minus, okay? And then last step, I'm running out of space. So right over here, so elasticity of demand is 0.4 over negative 0.22 absolute value, okay, 0.4 divided by 0.22, this is 1.81 or 1.82 to go on the answer. All right, so that's your answer. So just 1.82. So make sure when you do this type of question over here, if you see 2 point, do not do the new minus old divided by old. Use the midpoint method, which is the Q1 minus Q2 over Q1 plus Q2 divided by 2, and then P1 minus P2 over P1 plus P2 divided by 2, and then divide the two answers. That's your elasticity for demand. All right, guys, so that's how you do it. Okay. Um, that's just the midpoint method, and that's our answer, which means you got it right. Now, so what determines the price elasticity for demand? So there are a couple of determinant factors for it. The first factor, so if you think about the difference between breakfast cereal and sunscreen, now the thing about elasticity is so how flexible you are. It all goes back to really how flexible you are. That do you have to buy it? So between breakfast cereal and sunscreen, if the price of both increase by 20%, which one do you have to buy? Now, if you think about breakfast cereal, no restart. So if you think about breakfast cereal, we don't have to buy it. Here, let me close this. That's annoying. We don't have to buy it because you can also buy Eggo, waffles, leftover pizzas, pancakes. So you can buy other stuff besides breakfast cereal. Now, however, if the price for sunscreen increase, what else can you buy for sun protections? I mean, you can probably wear a long sleeve shirt, right? But you don't want to wear that when you go onto the beach. You can try to hold an umbrella, but you know what is it? What if it's windy outside? So it's not that much stuff you can go with. So for sunscreen, there isn't that many number of clothes substitute available. So you have to buy sunscreen. Therefore, sunscreen has a very low elasticity, so consumers are less flexible. But for breakfast cereal, because there's so many other substitutes available can buy. So for breakfast cereal, this is a very high elasticity. Then we don't have to buy it. So remember, with high elasticity, we don't have to buy it. With low elasticity, then we pretty much have to buy it. We have no choice. So number one determinant is how many number of substitutes available. Okay, and then second, between blue jeans and clothing, if the price increased by 20%, which one do you have to buy? Now, again, this also goes back to how many choice do you have. Now, between these two good over here, blue jean is very narrowly defined. That you don't have to buy blue jeans. You can buy black jeans. You can buy khakis, shorts, speedos. Now, for clothing, that if this increased by 20%, there's not much we can do. We have to buy it. So if the good is very narrowly defined, then this good has very high elasticity. But if the good is very broadly defined, has a very low elasticity. Okay. Wait, what did I say? Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. All right, next, insulin and creeping cruise. Again, which one do you have to have? I'm pretty sure that nobody have to have creeping cruise, so this is a luxury good. Insulin. Now, if you have diabetes, you need to have insulin, so that's a necessity. So between two good, if the good is a luxury, has a very high elasticity. If the good is a necessity, has a very low elasticity. This is now the last one. It's between long-term change and short-term change. So think like this. Suppose the price for gasoline, let's say for next week, and next week only for 1 week, the price for gasoline will be doubled. So right now it's what, $2 per gallon. Next week will be $4 per gallon. Now, would you change your behavior very dramatically for next week? And would you really stop going to work or stop going to school or buy a smaller car or move closer to where you are? Not really, right? Because it's a very short-term change. We can go through it. But if it's long-term change, so imagine the market says that for the next 10 years, the price of gasoline will be at least $5 per gallon. Then what would you do? You probably dump your SUVs. You probably buy the Prius, right? So you buy a smaller car, or you move closer to work. So in the long term, you probably change your behavior. So between two factors, if the change is for long-term change, then consumers has very high elasticity. We're more flexible. If the change is short-term change, then we have a very, very low elasticity. Then we cannot change. Okay, so that's the 4 factors. Now we have 5 type of demand curve. Remember in chapter 4 we mentioned that there are different type of demand curves. Now this one that's perfectly vertical. For this vertical demand curve, if the price decreased by 10%, so price goes down by 10%, you notice how the demand curve quantity over here didn't change at all. So quantity stayed the same. So if you do over here, the price changed by 10% and the quantity stayed the same, which means change by 0, then this elasticity is just 0. Now, for zero elasticity, we call this perfectly inelastic demand curve. That means it doesn't matter what the price is, we buy the same amount. So consumers, we cannot change. We always buy the same amount regardless of what the price is. That's called perfectly inelastic demand. Now, this is very common. You're going to see a very steep demand curve. So let's say price decreased by 10%, and then quantity increased by less than 10%. So this will be less than 1 here. Less than 1 on this demand curve is called inelastic demand. So for inelastic demand, consumers, we do care about price, but we care about just a little bit of it. So when the price change, we change our behavior by a little. That's called inelastic demand. And the next one, so let's say we have a 10% change in price and then 10% change in quantity, so they match each other. So this elasticity equal to 1. And then for this elasticity of 1, we call this one unit elastic. So unit elastic just means that how much a change in price is matched by how much a change in quantity. Now the fourth one, you're going to see a very somewhat flat demand curve. So it's not steep, but flat. And for this somewhat flat demand curve, let's suppose your price changed by 10%, and then quantity changed by more than 10%. So elasticity is more than 1. So every time elasticity more than 1, we call this elastic demand. So for elastic demands, consumers will care about price. So we're very sensitive. When the price change a little bit, we change by a lot. That's called elastic demand. And the last one is a horizontal demand curve. Now this one, price changed by 0, quantity changed by infinity. I mean, any number, so this is the infinity. That's not an 8, that's a infinity. So when the elasticity is infinity, this is called perfectly elastic demand curve. Now, for any of you taking 2302 next semester, for later on when we take the chapters on what is called perfect competition. In perfect competition, you're gonna see a demand curve that's perfectly flat. Okay. All right, so here are some real examples of in the world about elasticities. So first of all, X has very low elasticity, it's only 0.1. Remember, if it's less than 1, this is called inelastic. So X is very inelastic, and there are a couple reasons why that is. I mean, for one, X it's not a luxury good; it's a necessity. That we have to eat eggs, very nutritious. And also for this egg, did we say what kind of egg this is? I mean, did we say this is an organic red eggs? No, we didn't, right? Just says egg. So if it this is also very poorly defined. Therefore, has a very low elasticity. Now, if we say this is a free range organic red cat egg, then that will be different because that's very narrowly defined. Okay, so that's why X has very low elasticity. Now on the other side, if you see Mountain Dew, it's 4.4. Now remember, if it's more than 1, that's called elastic. So for Mountain Dew, it has very elastic demand. And then again, a couple reasons. For one, we don't have to have it; it's not a necessity. For two, that it's very narrowly defined. Now, if we say soft drink in general, then that will have a lower elasticity. But it says Mountain Dew, therefore has a very high elasticity. So it's very narrowly defined. All right. Now, for a demand curve, depends on where you are on the demand curve. Your elasticity can be very different. So if you look at this curve over here, if you do the math right, for the top portion of demand curve, this is 5.0, so there will be this will be elastic. For this lower portion, 0.2, that's inelastic. And this is unit elastic. So what that means that for any demand curve, the top portion of demand curve is tend to be more elastic because when the price is higher, consumers tend to look for other alternatives. So we're more flexible, we're more responsive when price change. But when the good is cheap, so when the price is low, we're very inelastic. So we don't change by that much. I mean, guys, really, for example, do you care if the price of lettuce increased by 20%? I mean, it sounds like a lot, right? But in reality, the price of lettuce goes from $1 each to $1.20 each. Would you really change your behavior because price for lettuce increased by 20%? Not really, right? Because that's still very cheap, so it's inelastic. But on the other side, let's say the price of iPhone changed by 20%. So it goes from what, let's say 1,000 to 1,200. Then we do change our behavior because it's a higher price good. So for any good on the same demand curve, top portion is elastic, lower portion is inelastic, and then somewhere in the middle you have unielastic. That means how much it changed by the quantity is matched by the change in price. So it's unielastic. All right. Now, elasticity can also play into total revenue. So for total revenue, we're going to learn this more in the later chapters. So total revenue is how much money company collect from customers. And then total revenue is a very simple formula in economics. I know that if you guys study accounting, you can have different formulas to find total revenue. You have unearned revenue, earned revenue, and all kinds of other stuffs. But we're going to have a very simple formula for economics for total revenue. It's just price times quantity. So how much do you sell times how many do you sell? That's your total revenue. That's how much money you're collecting from customers. But between this price and quantity, according to our demand curve, they work in opposite directions. So if you try to increase your total revenue, so collecting more money from customers, that if you increase your price, so according to law of demand, when price goes up, quantity goes down, right? So these two factors here, they're working against each other. So just by increasing the price alone doesn't really always give you a higher total revenue. And sometimes if you increase price by a little bit and your quantity decreased by a lot, you might even end up with a lower revenue over here. So we can use the characteristics of elasticity to find out how to maximize our total revenue. And it's very it's not that simple, but guys, I want you to write it down. So write down on your notes that when the demand is elastic, so demand is elastic means consumer care about the price. When demand is elastic, companies should lower price to increase total revenue. So demand elastic, we should lower price, increase total revenue. When demand is inelastic, we should increase price to increase total revenue. And the last one, when demand is unielastic, don't do anything, okay? Do nothing, because at unielastic, your total revenue is already maximized. So if you increase price and lower revenue, you lower price and lower revenue, so don't do anything. Just stay at the same point. At unielastic, your total revenue is maximized. All right, so write those down. Okay, so those who come handy when you do your quiz and test. Let's skip this. Already talk about it. And then there's a whole section on the elasticity of supply. I'm going to skip that because it's very similar to the elasticity for demand. So if you know the elasticity for demand, just reverse it, that'll be elasticity for supply. And then look at the curve, and there's basically the same information just for the supply curve. So, but if you have any question, let me know, send me an email, okay? And then we have a couple more slides for this chapter, then we can finish this one. Now, two more. So income elasticity for demand. This one measures how much does our consumer demand change when their income change. So for this one, now remember for the elasticity for demand, we said take an absolute value, so it's always positive, right? That only works for elasticity for demand for price. When doing this for income elasticity, do not take absolute value because we want to know what the sign is. Now, when you finish your income elasticity for demand, the formula for it is your percentage change in quantity divided by the percentage change in income, and then use the same midpoint method. And then once you finish, if this is positive, that means this good is a normal good. But if this is negative, that means this good is an inferior good. So the signage does matter. So if a positive is a normal good, if it's negative, it's an inferior good. And then also, I don't know if this is in your notes or in your book, that if this number is positive but less than 1, it's a necessity. But if it's more than 1, it's a luxury. Okay, so remember this. If it's less than 1, it's a necessity. If it's more than 1, it's a luxury good. And the last one is called the cross price elasticity for demand. So for this one, we'll compare the price of one good, so good 1, to the quantity of good 2. So between two different good here. And then this one, again, we care about the signage. So do not take absolute value. So we're going to do the percentage change in quantity for good 1 divided by the percentage change in the price of good 2. If this is positive, then these two good are substitute. If this is negative, then these two good are complement. Now, if for some reason you have a 0, then means these two good, they are not even related to each other. Okay, so very rarely do you see a 0 here. Now, I mean, that's probably not right. Imagine you compare the price change in chicken to the quantity change in demand for Justin Bieber CD. I mean, they don't have any relationship, so therefore they should have something close to a 0 cross price elasticity. All right, so guys, I think this is it for this. All right, that's it for this chapter. So guys, that's it for chapter 5. Have any question? Let me know, and again, send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to answer questions. Okay, so guys, good luck. I'll see you later.